Hey everybody, here in the shop, Jeff's working on this Vega here, and there's some things we want to show you in regards to wheel openings. Typically when you run a big tire like this, you can't stick with a stock wheel opening, or it makes the car near impossible to get the tire on and off. And a lot of guys will put a fiberglass fender stretcher on there. I've done it before. Typically don't like doing it, but it's a quick and dirty way to solve this problem. This car here, Sean brought us some quarter panel sections that he had cut off another Vega and asked us to use these to fix the wheel openings. It had fiberglass fender stretchers on it, and we took them off because they were poorly installed. So I'm going to give you some tips here and show you what Jeff's doing on this thing, and maybe this will help you with your project in the future. When I'm doing a gasser, typically I'll radius the wheel opening and weld a piece of 1/4-inch tubing on it. This one we probably will put 1/4-inch tubing on it, but you won't see it. So anyways, here it goes. Started with these pieces here. They were cut off of actually off a Cosworth Vega, the ones that are laying on the floor there. And as you can see here, this is where the original stretchers were put on, and they beat them up and bent them up. So we're having to cut farther up into the quarter panel section than we typically would to get to good metal. You notice on the panel there's black lacquer sprayed on there. That's so we could scribe along the pieces that we've pre-fit, give us a real nice precise edge to weld these together, because when you're welding them, the smaller the gap, the less shrinkage you get. And therein on these parts are used, so we're going to have to MIG weld this. We can't TIG weld it because there'll be enough crap and corruption in the weld that it won't weld properly. So we're going to go ahead and spot MIG these together, and I'll show some of that stuff in a later video, but I just wanted to show you what Jeff's got going on here. What we've done is we've come up with a distance that we liked here between the panel, front and back, so we know the tire wouldn't rub. I believe on this one we picked 1.25 inches, and then split the original panel in half. That's how far we're widening this thing. Then on this car here, we determined how much bad metal was on the car, and that in turn told us where to cut this panel. Because this, like I say, this original stuff was all bent up real bad, and we're trying to leave this piece in here as much of the original sheet metal as we can. Cut it up close to the seam here. You don't typically, if you're using a quarter skin, you don't want to lap over because you close your margin up. So we're gonna MIG weld this along here, and also you'll see the clecos. What Jeff's done here is he's left a small tab behind here to hold this panel in place, and then once we get some good tacks on it, we can reach in there with our little air saw, cut them off, and then just finish welding it all up. So as you can see, Jeff's done a fantastic job of making that seam nice and tight, which will be the next step. The bottoms of these pieces were gone. You can see that. We'll have to rebuild them, but this gives us the basic shape. And like I say, there's rust on the panel, stuff like that makes it a little tough to weld. To determine where we started this panel, like I say, we just sort of held up everything in place, and we tried to use these existing body lines here and these body lines down here to determine where the panel had to lay. Got us some basic measurements, and then made sure the measurements were the same on both sides. So we measured from like this get my camera there, from this edge here to this edge here on both sides, and made that the same. Then we measured from the front B-pillar to here to make sure they were both the same. Then we could, like I say, get everything rough clecoed in place, and then scribe it, and you spray it with black lacquer, scribe it. You could use Dykem, but my Dykem cans were dead. I've let them set too long, so black lacquer works fine because it sands off real easy. you use like regular enamel, and it gums up the paper and everything, so we just use black lacquer there. But anywho, got a lot to work with here. Be time consuming, but when you're doing this, you want to make sure these panels, when you tack them, are perfectly level with each other. You want them right. You don't want them like this one here sticks out a little. You don't want to weld that like that, because then you're grinding one of the panels real thin to fit. You want to try to minimize the grinding down as low as possible. But like I say, we'll go through and tack this. And as you're tacking, so you start down here, okay? You tack about every inch, get it nice and flush, but then you notice that your gap here is tightening up. What you do is you take a hammer and a dolly, and you hammer and dolly the TIG welds, or the tacks, excuse me, and then that will stretch them out and pull this panel back down. So a lot of work to get steel. Then in the end, we'll build pieces here just to keep this line straight. We'll build this bottom angle piece and get that all tacked in, and then we'll finish filling this stuff in here. So a lot of work's gone into this car. Like right now, Jeff's cutting close to the line, so it's not as hard to do. And he's got this one pretty good here. This car had a lot of Bondo down on the bottom of it, so, and we're, like I say, we'll fix them later. Basically, we're trying to get the openings done. But like I say, Jeff's trimming this up with snips. You can use a cutoff wheel, but as you can see, he left those little tabs right there so that he's got something to work to. And then there's whole clique of holes up here that will work. So all working good. I'll give you an update on what's going on everywhere else. Finally got these doors done as I'm going to get them, put it that way. Filled all the holes with epoxy where I Clecoed it. It turned out a lot better than I thought. Then I finished the inside edges, sort of, kinda. I body filled them and sanded them down. I mean, the body man will have to do some more work on it. Basically, it's shoot primer on them and finish them up, so that's good. The next thing I'm gonna do is weld the Zeus tabs together so I can mount the deck lid in the front end. So that's all going good. And then Ronnie's working on this one. He's got the control arms on it and the spindle in place. Now we're having to put the upper shock mount in it, and they weren't exactly like we wanted, so we're modifying them a bit, but it's all going good. I got to come up with a tie rod end. I think a Mustang 2 tie rod ends will work on this, so get some of them coming. Hopefully next week this will be ready to leave the shop. And then I want to show you what I've done on the half-baked car in the back too. Not a ton, but I got some stuff done. I got the bumper mounted. Had to modify the bumper brackets a little bit, but I got that on. You've seen the hitch, how that goes. And then that receiver piece is right behind this panel, so I'm just going to cut a rectangle out of this so the hitch will stick out. Get that going on. And you can see a little bit there, I got the panard bar in it, and I want you to see how he did that. Because sometimes you got to think outside of the box. To get a panard mount, I used a piece of 1-inch heavy wall tubing and bent it on a 70-degree angle so I could get out around the spring bucket, and then I kept it 2 inches away from the frame rail. The top piece is heavy wall tubing. I tapped that for a 3/4 inch bolt, so I've got a 3/4 by 3/4 heim on that side, and then on that side over there I used 2 tabs and used a 5/8 by 3/4, and that's a piece of heavy wall 1-inch tubing that I tapped there to get my panard. I wanted the panard as level as possible. It had to be below the floor a few inches. The floor will be the height of that tube that the spring bucket's on, so I got plenty of room there. And I didn't want it behind the housing because I didn't want to weigh it in the way of the shocks and or wheelie bars. So this is the thing I come up with. And then I put a piece of tubing in there as a gusset. I'll have to finish weld all this stuff, but yeah, that's what I come up with, a panard. Don't have to necessarily be a bracket welded on top of the housing or the back or anything, but that's my answer to all this. So wanted you to see that. That's what we got going on in here. Thick Ronnie just showed up, so I'll talk to him a little bit and try to get out of these guys' way. Thanks for watching.